Hey, my dear Chika, I'm glad you're here. Pick up your tea or whatever it is you drink and let's have this conversation. So, we are genderless souls. When the soul comes into the human baby, they are not gendered. Gender is a construct. Gender is not a real thing that exists. Sex is a real thing. There's male and female and other. But gender is something that has been created by society. And once we fit into this box, society has this way of telling us a lot of things. A lot of the things you would say when you introduce yourself is a box. Be it your name, even, your name has a certain kind of box. My name, I have two names that I use mostly. And one is my English name, as I call it. A lot of you African girls will say the same, African people. You have an English name and you have, what do I call my other name? I actually came to realize that I thought of it as my real name. And that really gave me pause, and that is Shiro. I thought of Shiro as my real name, or the longer form, which is Wanjiro. But either way, all of them are boxes, because my real name somewhat goes back to my roots, my ancestral roots. My English name goes back into colonialism, really, goes back into that construct. My surname goes back into my family ties. So all of those are boxes, different boxes that I can use to identify myself with. Go on, what do you do? Whatever your answer is to that, I'm a lawyer. That again puts me in a certain box. People hear lawyer and think certain things in their head. So that's already a box. What else? What do you do for fun? What do I do for fun? So back to boxes. You're married is a box. I am Mrs. So-and-so, Mr. Mr. That wording that has the notion of a Mrs. being attached to a man and a Mr. being independent, whether or not he's attached, is a box. So there are all these boxes we have. Religion is a box. Employer is a box. We just have these many boxes. And the thing with a box is that it's something that you use to identify yourself. But there's more to you than this box. There is an essence to you that is devoid. If you stripped down everything else, if you removed all those boxes, there is a real you, your essence, your soul. And that's the soul that I'm saying is not gendered. The part that came into this world had not been told these things about how girls need to wash dishes and boys need to fight. This is something that you picked up. So that's that part of it. And I really do want to say, for me, the concept of a gendered God absolutely doesn't make sense. For me, it is a non-starter. My God is neither male nor female. It's just, again, because of the point that male and female are created notions. So the Father God, a male God, then does that remove from him these attributes which are softer? Because that's really what we do when we create the man and the woman, the genders, the male and the female. That really the male is everything that the female is not. And the female is soft, weak, even unintelligent, cannot do much on her own, needs to be supported, needs to be protected. And then we tell the men then that they are harsh and strong and powerful. Then we create this divide where then the man needs to protect the woman, presumably from himself or others like him, which is really, really strange. But point being that God is beyond this construct of how we have gendered things. So I like to think of God as a she, because for me that really helps break down the box that God has been put in. God belongs in no box. Then I can relate to a softer God, so that it's not a conflict in my head to have this ever-loving God who then has all this wrath, all this Old Testament wrath. Quite frankly, for me, it was really difficult to put those two together. It didn't make sense. It didn't make sense that harsh God, if I put him that way, that harsh God is the God of today as well, and that I might go to this harsh male God and get his wrath. No. So if I had to reconstruct all of that in my head, and part of what I did is that I try to think of God as she, And then if I do that, it then softens the imagery of God that I have in my own head. But then I experience God as well. And that also really helps, because God tells me that, no. These harsh and mean and terrible tendencies which have been associated with him are not the real God. That God is available to me and someone that I can speak to, and that's also quite beautiful. So what we're looking at today is some of these examples that the fact that it is a construct. How do we know that it is a construct, that this is something that was created? I don't really think that there is this evil power that sits behind somewhere and just writes the rules. I don't know. But that just writes the rules and says this is how we are going to do it. But I read a couple of books and I want to bring you examples from them that show how history has been redone, how history has been reconstructed and recreated in such a way that the things that women do are forgotten, actually deleted, it was mind-blowing for me. I didn't really think that was so. Because you see, when I grew up, then I all these teachings that I have of men have made me believe that men are much more capable than women. So then it has placed me, this box that I'm in as a woman, it has placed me in a certain space that tells me that men do more, men achieve more. As a woman, I can strive for it, but the natural balance is that men achieve more. So in reading these books and seeing that there has been a pattern of women who have been doing amazing things, but have somehow just been deleted from history, has helped change that construct in my head. Because sometimes that's what we need. We need space. I'm always talking about beliefs. The beliefs we have in our heads, we don't even know they're beliefs. We just sometimes think they're the truths, that they are the truth. And what differentiates a truth from a lie is even what we call a fact depends a lot also on how the information is presented. So going back to history is written by men. At the point when writing was invented, women were not really allowed to get into that space. So a lot of the record keeping. And there's been a lot in history that has had women subordinated by the law, by traditions, by rules, by rulers, by not creators, by the system, in which you found like a woman who, it differs within history. So you'd find that there's a time when a woman could actually be independent. Now, let me even tell you something. The original meaning of the word virgin was an independent woman, meaning a woman who did not need to rely on a man, neither her father, her brother, her husband, and could live independently. She could earn her own keep and she was okay. That's the original meaning of the word virgin. Now look where we are. Now look where we are. That the virginity has become tied to sexuality. It's really interesting that there's this talk of the what is she? Who the virgin, the virgin and the whore. That there's all this talk in the Bible about, so it would be Mary, the mother of Christ, and Mary Magdalene. So this is the dichotomy. Apparently, this is how women can be viewed, which is really, really, really super strange. Because when we look at women that way, we're looking at them in relation to their usefulness to men. And the question is, what is women's usefulness to themselves and to the world? Which is what we want to look a little on today. I want to start. Today I've written down a couple of books. I won't just be forgetting them. So I think I'll start with Normal Women by Philippa Gregory. So this history I've just been giving you on the fact that there were things that women were doing. What she did, I love this book, Normal Women. I think I've said that a couple of times on this show, because what she did is that she went back into history. She said, no, wait. When men were conquering and doing and all these wonderful achievements that we see in the history books, where were the women? What were they doing? And she went through like court cases and stuff like that, just records, actual records, and this is in England. And she found that they were in some leading riots. So in some cases where like I don't know if I'll get this right, but there was this system of land acquisition by the king. And it meant that the king was now going to take over all land. Land had been held by people generally. Then the king decided that no, the feudal system. The king is now becoming the owner of all the land. And then there's just this stratification of people. You're either noble, you're poor, you're whatever. And then when the land started just getting encroached, because then they'd send like what are they called, armies, whatever they were called at that point in time, I don't know, and take over the land. And then it's the women, a lot of the women are the ones who led the actual riots, revolts and protests, and saying no. And there was an actual real fight where the women were standing up and saying, this is our land, you're not going to come and pick it. We do not care about you and what you're doing. This is our livelihood. This is where we're standing behind. And she sees this through the records of so many women who are arrested because of that. So it's interesting to see that. She even says, she saw through the records of women who've gone to war. We don't think of women as going to war because now we've been told that no, women are little, small. Now maybe not as much, but before, not even so many years. Let me put it at 50 years ago. But even less than that. You had this notion of men are the ones who are there to protect and stuff like that. But there were records of women doing this. And there were records of women, when the men went off to war, the women who stayed behind then became the ones who were running the businesses, running the properties, doing all these things that we've been traditionally been told that women were too weak or foolish to be able to do. So keeping the records, maintaining business at a profit. So we don't really think about these kind of things, which is why I find reading such books empowering in terms of my own concept of myself and my abilities. Like I've done the video on racism, that we all have some form of internalized racism, but this is the same kind of thing. We all have some form of internalized patriarchy. Having heard this all our lives, whether you're a man or a woman, is something, it just creates this reality within your own head, within your own space, within your own being, such that the way you show up is based on that belief, and you don't necessarily know it. And this is why you'd find sometimes that there are women who do not, often, there are women who will not reach out for certain positions. We will not ask for raises. We will make sure that we are 1,000% able to do the job before we put in our CVs, as opposed to men who might only be 20% able to do the job but have the confidence to do it, who we are told are much more confident in speaking up for themselves and asking for raises and occupying space. So all of this on account of this thing that is behind, because you might feel it, and sometimes as a woman you might really be unhappy with yourself. I remember having a conversation with someone about even reaching out for a position that she could do and asking for a raise, and it had never crossed her mind. And that's really the point. It's someone who told her, why don't you reach out for this? It was some form of leadership position, and it had never crossed her mind. Why? Because she has that internalized view of herself as smaller. And of course, there's a whole lot of things that come to it. There's a good girl, there's all that kind of stuff. But even this internalized patriarchy plays a big role that we do not always see. So another example I want to come into here is When Women Rule the World by Cooney. So I love this book. It talks about ancient Egypt, and it was a bit of the basis of my research when I was writing Date Like Cleopatra. The good girl flips the script. So this Date Like Cleopatra, a book about Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, Pharaoh really. She ruled for 21 years, 21 years, and was the last pharaoh. And it's really interesting. So in this book, Cooney speaks about 6 magnificent women, and the ways that they ascended to the throne, the way they managed to get there, how they ruled, and all these kind of things. But something very interesting that I saw in the book was that the men who came after them, often their sons, would go through the process of removing the statues they had erected, removing the are they encryptions? Like what they'd write on, whether it is their what do you call it, their tomb, or all the records actually, even actual written records. They just go through the process of removing this, and how it has been found that this was removed was that in some cases when going through ancient artifacts or the archaeological study of these places, they could find that maybe the new ruler superimposed their name on top of the queen. So in digging through, they could, because this is really, like rock, or sometimes even in the written one, they could see that this is actually what happened. And that tells you that the level to which women have actually been deleted, not, it's not a mistake. It's not something that just so happened and we didn't know. An actual act of deleting them from history. And she did say, Karakuni, in the process of researching the book, she really had to go through a lot because not so much is known. And in some of their cases, she just had to recreate an imagined history for them. Yeah. But there is, at least, she could see the fact that they were rulers. But that's the idea of deleting their... For me, that was just so crazy. Then now let me take you to the one that has really... This is a book I read most recently. It is Her Space, Her Time by Shohini Ghose. This is a book about, let me call it science. This is a book about the contribution of a lot of women into science that has practically been deleted. Practically. And I'll just read you an extract from Wikipedia that talks about one of these examples that she gives. And for me, it was mind-blowing. Because there's all this activity to push women into STEM. STEM. What is STEM? I hope you know. It has science and mathematics. Technology? Something else. So to be more interested in the physics and the chemistry and sciences generally and the mathematics. Because for whatever reason, it was found that a lot of women do not move it towards those subjects. And for me, I'd say part of it might be what this woman has uncovered, what Shohini has uncovered, that there is really no record of women doing well in the sciences. So then the thought process becomes, we can't do well. Shohini herself she is a scientist. I forget exactly what her field is. And she, of course, went to schools and found herself to be the only woman. This has happened quite a lot. I presume she's around my age or slightly younger than me. I'm 46. And at our age set, that these are the things that are happening. She says, in fact, a lot of the things that she found that the women whom she writes about went through in terms of difficulty in accessing schools and getting like professors who would work with them and that kind of thing is something she's gone through firsthand. Yeah. And anyway, so I want to give two examples from her book. One is the Harvard computers. So apparently a long, long time ago, I don't know how long ago this was. I can't remember. I don't have the details. But either way, at the point when they started looking at the stars and studying them and trying to figure out how far they are from each other and what is where and what is the nature of the universe, what material is the universe made from and those kind of things, there were a lot of women. But the particular women that I want to single out are the women who were used in the meticulous study of looking at these plates, because the pictures would be on plates, and doing the calculations, this itsy bitsy tiny little calculations, because they'd take like pictures at different times to try and see what has changed and where they are, and try to do little calculations to understand the nature of the universe. And this deliberate work that needs just silence and measuring and looking and pinpointing, because you also need to identify that this one is the same one as that one, seeing like the level of brilliance, how bright they are. So really, really, really detailed, meticulous work was thought to be for women. Why? Because women, what was the argument? That women are tidy. Something along those lines. Women are tidy and used to doing like work that requires a lot of small effort, but it wasn't thought of as intelligent work. That's the point. It was thought of along the lines, I don't know why it was thought of along the lines as washing dishes. I truly don't know. But the men wouldn't do that. The men would take the pictures, bring them to the women, and the women would do all this chatting. So bring about all this actual information. And these women were called computers. Yeah, the initial computers, they were thought of as computers. What they were doing, I guess, was computing. And it was only at the point when it became apparent that that is the actual work. The taking of the picture, anyone can take a picture. But that is the actual work. That is the work that was bringing about the real data, the real information that was needed to then chart out the universe. It was only at that point that then it became no longer available for women. And a lot of women were doing it probably unpaid or just paid tiny little salaries, because that's the structure, that was the nature of the structure. This is how women are kept small. Because if you need a job, then this is the only job that's available to you. And it is meticulous, it is really, 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 really draining. But then you don't even get much pay. You do it, you don't get much pay, and you don't get recognition. At the end of all that, when you have all this amazing information we now have about the universe, you were just someone who was doing the same thing as washing dishes. Yeah, that is how history is erased. That is how women get to think of themselves as an what's the word? We don't matter, inconsequential. And in time, this job was then taken over by men. And when it was taken over by men, suddenly it's very important and very critical. Yeah. Let me give you the other example that I want to give you from the book. This is actually from I'm reading from Wikipedia. And the person is Liz Meitner. That's her name. I had never heard about her before. Before I read this book, I had never heard about her. That said, I do not really study a lot of sciences as such. I know Marie Curie. I think that's now a common household name, and she is mentioned in the book. But a lot of the other women who are there, I had never heard of. But let me read this for you. Was an Austrian-Swedish nuclear physicist who was instrumental in the discovery of nuclear fission. Instrumental in the discovery of nuclear fission. The atomic bomb. Nuclear fission, the power, everything that we do with nuclear power. I mean, she was instrumental in the discovery. So this book really gives the details of what happened. She saying she was instrumental, I'm glad to see that Wikipedia says this, because of course the Nobel Committee did not. And this is really what I wanted to read into. And maybe let me just jump into that. It might have what I want to say. So despite the many honors that Meitner received in her lifetime, she did not receive the Nobel Prize, while it was awarded to Otto Hahn for the discovery of nuclear fission. She was nominated 49 times for physics and chemistry, Nobel Prizes, but never won. When Hahn was awarded for his discovery of the fission of the heavy atomic nuclei, Meitner was the one who told Hahn and Strassman to test their radium in more detail. Just to give it the background. So what she did is that she's really the one who discovered it when we said. So people were doing experiments, but the experiment that Hahn did is not something that had crossed his mind. So she and I believe it was her nephew were the ones who came up with this concept, but then they spoke. They were kind-hearted people. They happened to mention it to others, and the person who then went and recorded, and I might be getting this wrong, but the person who went and recorded the paper first was the one who got the award. But more than that, there was a lot of thinking and a lot of work that went behind it. And I want to read for you things that have been said in time about this. So Elizabeth Crawford and Mark Walker wrote, "It appears that the Liz Meitner did not share the 1944 prize because the structure of the Nobel Committee was ill-suited to assess interdisciplinary work, because of the members of the chemistry committee were unable or unwilling to judge her contribution fairly, and because during the war, the Swedish scientists relied on their own limited expertise. Meitner's exclusion from the chemistry award may well be summarized as a mixture of disciplinary bias, political obtuseness, ignorance, and haste." Bias. Someone else said, Max Perut said, "Having been locked up in the Nobel Committee's files these 50 years, the documents leading to the unjust award now reveal that the protracted deliberations by the Nobel jury were hampered by lack of appreciation both of the joint work and that had preceded the discovery and of Meitner's written and verbal contributions after her flight from Berlin." So she had to, because of the war, she had to flee from Berlin. She was Jewish, and then eventually settled in Sweden. And then there was a lot of exchange, there was a lot of discussion, there was a lot that went on, and she did not receive the award. Then there was one more quote here that I wanted to get. At the time, Meitner herself wrote in a letter, "Surely Han fully deserved the Nobel Prize for Chemistry. There is really no doubt about it. But I believe that Frisch and I contributed something not insignificant to the clarification of the process of uranium fission, how it originates, and that it produces so much energy, and that was something very remote to Han." So Frisch was her nephew. So what she's saying is, fine, maybe he deserved it, but the thing that actually brought us to the process of nuclear fission is something that was very remote to Han. He hadn't thought about it himself. So I read all this, and then you think of it, 49 times this woman has been nominated. And yes, she went on to get other kinds of awards and rewards, but this is really the scientific committee saying, F you. And when all is said and done, it would come down to gender, according to me anyway. Because yes, there might be other biases at play, but the person who actually had the key to unlock, she's been celebrated by Albert Einstein as like the German Marie Curie or something like that. So this is someone who everyone else at that level understood was magnificent, amazing, wonderful. But then when we go back, if we're now looking back at the Nobel Prizes, because that's what a lot of us do when we're trying to see who's who, she's not there. So, I gave you all this to say that there is an actual deliberate effort to delete women. So when you don't see women out there, when you don't see them doing great things, it's not because they haven't done great things. It's because the people who are writing it down and the people who are making the decisions are often men who, like us, have this inbuilt patriarchal bias within their heads that then say that women should not. Such that if you are recording this, it is better that this be recorded from the perspective of a man, because a man is better suited to do these things. And it's sad, but I don't bring it here as a sad point. I bring this here as a point of power. Because what you can then do is understand that, look, the history you have is not full. You have the opportunity to be the damn best, whatever it is you do. To be the damn best at being whoever you are, such that you do not need to be limited. We then now go back to our limitations, go back to our beliefs. When is the first time you were told, you heard that you could not do this? When is the first time that you believed it? Dig back down into that and understand that the person who told you, whoever they may have been, had some bias within them. Don't accept the bias for yourself. You stand up on your own 2 feet and decide, this is something that I want to do. This is something I'm going to do because I am divine. My soul has no gender, and it is my soul that powers me. I can do whatever the hell I want to do. Hell yeah. I hope this inspires you, and I hope you go give them hell. I appreciate having you here.